in blue color as showing where 10 to 14% of the population in those states having obesity, and this starts in 1985. And here's 86, 1987. And we hit 1991, and some states now have 15 to 19% of the population of their state with obesity. In 1997, we have some states with greater than 20% of obesity in them. And in 2001, we have some states now with greater than 25% obesity. And in 2005, we have some states with greater than 30% of obesity, as well as in 2006 in their state. So statisticians are actually trying to calculate the date when every United States citizen will be obese. So if we don't change what we're currently doing, we're going to have a world of obesity with all of the complications that are associated with obesity going with it. In fact, the kids in the middle schools today will be the first set of children that we bury as adults will outlive them, because they're completely have grown up in a world where we have portion distortion. So what their idea of a portion size is and their idea of healthy food is completely distorted, because they have never seen what a normal size of a muffin is, or what healthy eating habits are. In fact, look at the Chipotle burritos out there, and when you see a Chipotle burrito, think about how many people that might have fed at your dinner table growing up. And the other day I showed a young girl a size of what an actual muffin should be versus the two-handed muffin, that weighs a couple pounds. I mean, that's not your typical, and should not be your typical portion size. So with that being, with the world going the way it is and our portions out of control, we really need to look at how we can stop obesity trends in America and how we can better be role models, as well as help ourselves. Because not all fat cells are created equal. In fact, we used to think that fat cells were just storage depots and that they would do nothing. They were highly inactive and they just stored fat. But we're actually learning that the fat around our abdomen is very active. It works actually against us. So when we're trying to be healthy, when we have these fat cells around our abdomen, it secretes markers that work against us. And here's an example of what happens when we have all the fat in our abdomen. When we have this fat that gets in our abdomen, it tucks in deep around our organs, then it pushes on our organs and it causes problems even among our organs. So this slide, there's a 100-pound difference in these individuals that's on the slide here. And you can see the yellow that represents like chicken fat, and you can see in the cavity, the abdominal cavity there where all the organs are, a lot of the chicken fat, which is surrounded by the organs on the person on the left, not as much with the person on the right. So this person has a lot of visceral fat. We actually have just purchased a body composition assessment scanner that can actually give your lean muscle mass as well as your percent of body fat, as well as the amount of visceral fat you have, the fat that's tucked in deeper on your organs, because that's what's lethal and that's what works against you. And so that fat actually is highly active, and these are the many chemicals and substances that fat secretes. So it secretes angiotensinogen, which raises blood pressure. It increases free fatty acids and insulin, which increases your risk for diabetes. It causes clotting problems. Most of the stuff on the left-hand side are all inflammation markers, so it leads to asthma, arthritis, inflammation, type 2 diabetes. In addition to all that, here's all the organs that fat affects. It affects our lungs with asthma and sleep apnea. It affects our liver. In fact, they're saying by 2015, so just in another couple years, they're saying by 2015, the #1 cause or reason for a liver transplant is most likely going to be non-alcoholic fatty liver. And all that is our liver processes carbs and sugars. And when our liver can't keep up with processing all the carbs and sugars that we put in it, then we have a little inflammation on the liver, and then when that liver or that inflammation on the liver turns to scar tissue, we don't get that back. So it's the same thing as an alcoholic fatty liver, only we don't get it from drinking alcohol. We get it from all the carbs and sugars that we consume. It also causes some, the abdominal fat will also cause abnormal menses, infertility, polycystic ovary syndrome, osteoarthritis, skin. It'll cause some cancers, cause pancreatitis, lead to heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, stroke, and cataracts. So it's really important that we get that, that weight off of our abdomen. And in fact, if you go and have your body mass index calculated, the taller you are or the shorter you are, the less accurate the body mass index is. So the taller you are or the shorter you are, the less accurate it is. So we really go by waist circumference. So your waist circumference should be half your height in inches. So I think you have to do some questions at the end of the presentation to get your points. And so I think one of the questions is going to be, what should your waist circumference be? And so if you're 70 inches tall, your waist circumference should be 35 inches or less. And oftentimes people with higher waist circumferences do have an increased amount of abdominal fat and even visceral fat. However, just because someone is thin does not mean they have a lot of visceral fat. Some people eat nothing but junk all day, so it can be a little deceiving. So as far as finding visceral fat, that's why we have a body scanner to even get people that may appear thin or with a normal weight to find out if they do have visceral fat and if that's their risk. So with that, we'll start with some weight loss tips. And my first tip, I'm going to save you a bunch of reading, because if you take all of the diet books that are out there today and you were to look at what would they have in common, every single diet book out there would tell you to get rid of simple sugars and carbohydrates in your diet, as well as to get rid of processed foods and trans fats in your diet. So I just saved you a bunch of reading. And that's really one of the main keys to weight loss, is just getting rid of simple carbs and simple sugars in your diet and get rid of processed foods and trans fats in your diet. So tip number 1, remove simple carbs and simple sugars in your diet. So what is the worst kind of sugar out there, simple sugars out there? High fructose corn syrup is one of the worst simple sugars out there. So this is a carbohydrate or simple sugar that's bad for you. It's high fructose corn syrup. But also you got to watch things that are in white flour, refined sugars, like breads, pastas, cereals, toast, rice, crackers, cookies, cakes, pies, sodas, fruit drinks, muffins, bagels, popcorn, chips, ice cream, and that's just to name a few, but all those things will break down to simple carbs and simple sugars. Breakfast cereals are not healthy. They're loaded with sugar. Be careful with breads. A lot of soups, people think of soups for sodium, but lots of soups have high carbs and high sugars. Your potato soup, loaded with carbs and sugars. Your noodle, chicken noodles, the noodles and the rice in the soups, loaded with carbs and sugars. And then if you add crackers and bread to it, it's again loaded with carbs and sugars. So we really got to watch the amount of carbs and sugars, and obviously our sweets. And what happens is we get addicted to sugars, and so we keep eating these sugars every couple of hours. And we really need to think about stopping this, and we need to retrain our brain in order to do that. Because if you start your day with carbs and sugars, every couple of hours you're going to need it. And it's hard for me to help my patients stop eating carbs and sugars when they start their day with it. Because if they think they crave it at 8 a.m., think what they're going to do at 10 o'clock after they just gave themselves something at 8. The craving's going to be worse, and every couple of hours they're going to need it. I always tell my patients, if you feed your kids Pop-Tarts and cereal in the morning at 7:30, at 9:30, 10 o'clock they're in math class, are they going to be thinking about the math problem, or are they going to be crashing down wondering what person's going to give them a piece of gum, a candy bar, or something to get their sugar up? And that's the same thing we do as adults. If we feed ourselves sugars at 7 o'clock, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be sipping on coffee with more sugar, having soda, having pretzel and M&M or popcorn. We're going to have to do that every couple of hours. In the Medical Plaza building where I work here at the plaza, if you go to the vending machine between 3 and 5 o'clock in the lobby, people do not need dinner, but they need a pick-me-up. They need to feed their sugar withdrawal symptoms so they can go back to their desk, work on the last couple problems of the workday, and then go home and refeed their sugar withdrawal symptoms. So they don't need dinner, but they need to feed their sugar withdrawals. So we do need to retrain our brain. We need to stop and think about what we're doing. And when we see something like this, you know, if I told someone to go have 20 tablespoons of sugar, you would say, oh, I'm not going to eat that. That's disgusting, right? That's disgusting, Becky. I don't want it. But if I showed you this picture, or if I even said, hey, I've got some bread rising in the back. It's fresh. It's warm. I put some cinnamon on it. I got some sugar and some icing to go with the cinnamon. You know, you start, you know, drooling over it because we've trained our brain to think that's delicious. It's good for us. That's what we want. In fact, that cinnamon roll has over 730 calories. It has 24 grams of fat and 114 grams of total carbohydrates. So what's going to happen when you eat this is your liver is going to be in overdrive, your system's going to be in overdrive, you're going to come crashing down an hour and a half, 2 hours later, you're going to be exhausted. So we need to think to ourselves, I'm not going to eat that roll, I want to be effective in a couple hours. I've got a lot of stuff to do, I've got a lot of stuff to get done today, I don't want to have a lot of inflammation going on in my body, I don't want to put my liver in overdrive, I don't want to be tired, I don't want to be sluggish. And it's really crazy the amount of sugar that we've consumed. In fact, the sugar intake over the past several years has done nothing but raise. In fact, we're at 160 pounds per person per year in sugar consumption, which is crazy. So, you know, I have 20 and 30-year-olds that I see, and they'll come in and they'll say, Becky, I'm just tired, I'm exhausted. They're 20 years old. They should not be exhausted. They're exhausted because they're on sugar high, sugar low, sugar high, sugar low. Liver can't keep up with all the sugar. I mean, they're not eating what they're genetically designed to eat. They're overloading their body, and they're not eating foods that give them energy. So tip number one would be to definitely cut out these simple carbs and simple sugars in your diet. And let's say, for instance, that you don't drink sodas. Let's say you don't drink soda at all, and you added a soda a day. Or let's say you're drinking soda and you added an additional soda a day. When you do that, one extra soda a day, you will gain 17 pounds of weight just by adding that one extra soda a day per year. You'll increase your risk for obesity by 60%, increase your risk of diabetes by 40% just by having that one extra soda a day. And when you eat these carbs and sugars and sodas, and fruit juices, by the way, let's talk about fruit juices. Fruit juices are loaded with sugar. If somebody gave you and I 8 ounces of apple juice, okay, think about 8 ounces. It's a relatively small glass, and they gave each of us 8 ounces of apple juice. We could probably sip that in 2 or 3 big swallows, smack our lips, and say, boy, that tasted good. But we would be we'd still be just as hungry, correct? So what we'd want, so we then would still eat the same amount. If what made up that 8 ounces of apple juice was 3 apples. So if we had 3 apples sitting in front of us, could we eat 1 apple right after the next without getting somewhat full? Because in the apple, you get the fiber, the nutrients, the bulk, everything else. Versus, you know, in the fruit juice, you're getting the natural sugars and some antioxidants, but you're not getting all the fiber and the bulk. So if you ever want the juice from a fruit, eat the fruit. Because fruit juices are just loaded with sugar. So we need to retrain our brains. We need to think that eating these things are just a treat, and we should do it in moderation because it puts our body in overload. Our body's not genetically designed to consume all that. And we need to watch our portions. If you go and you want to have a soda on a rare occasion and you go out to eat, don't let them fill your extra-sized large glass 5 times because you've just drank a 2-liter. You need to make sure that it's your treat, your main source of water is, or main source of fluid is your water. That's what's your nutrient. I wouldn't even drink tea, or not tea. I wouldn't even drink soda. It just adds to